The Corinthians' course of action is described in verse 6 as the punishment inflicted on him. The word for punishment can denote a penalty, rebuke, or censure, and implies causing others to suffer what they deserve. The context gives the impression of some kind of formal disciplinary action decided on and carried out by the congregation. Excommunication, or at least the withholding of church privileges, is suggested by the danger posed to the individual, so that he will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. The responsible exercise of discipline was something that Paul had great difficulty in instilling in his churches, especially a church like Corinthians. It is the corporate responsibility of the church to punish wrongdoing, to excommunicate in the case of persistent sin, and to reinstate the repentant. Paul had to rebuke the Corinthians initially for not disciplining the individual in question. Now the church has gone too far in the other direction. Paul's counsel to them is threefold. First, the punishment by the majority is sufficient. Mention of the man's sorrow shows that the punishment had its intended effect. The person had repented of his action. Reference to the majority points to the presence of dissenting minority who thought that the discipline was either too lenient or, more probably, too severe. The Corinthians are instructed, second, to forgive and comfort the man rather than to continue the discipline. Instead of apathemi, the customary word in the gospel for forgiveness, Paul uses charizomai, which means to give freely and not to forgive on the basis of one gracious attitude toward a person. God's gracious attitude toward us in the person of his Son is surely in the background here. It is likely that the man is becoming discouraged by the church's continuance of the discipline. What is needed at this point is for the Corinthians to stop the punishment and to encourage rather than the NIV comfort. See the note. The third and last piece of advice Paul gives the church is to reaffirm their love for the man. The verb to reaffirm, kaiosai, means to confirm or ratify. It was commonly used in Paul's day of a will, treaty, law, decree, bill of sale, or other legal document coming into force. Paul is probably thinking of a public reinstatement as a means of reassuring him of the congregation's love. That they are to confirm their love for the man shows that Christian discipline is always intended to be remedial, never merely punitive. The Corinthians had to be reminded of this, but it is not much different today. Many churches have equal difficulty knowing when to discipline and when to forgive. These verses point to the dangers in carrying discipline too far. First, there is a danger for the individual. What starts out as godly sorrow can unwittingly lead to a consuming guilt or to an preoccupation with one's sin. The Corinthians are to forgive and encourage the man so that he will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. The picture is of a drowning person who is in danger of being swallowed up by his grief, as by a rushing river or flood of water. Discipline that goes beyond the stage of godly sorrow becomes strictly punitive and non-redemptive. There is also a danger for the congregation. The Corinthians are to forgive the man so that Satan might not outtoot them. The word for outtoot, pleoniktio, means to take advantage of someone with the intent to cheat or exploit them. Over-discipline can provide Satan with just the foothold into the life of a congregation that he covets, for we are not, Paul continues, unaware of his schemes. The NIV misses the wordplay here. The Greek is literally, we are not unmindful of his mind, which in the case of Satan is a scheming, plotting mind. What kind of plotting is in view? It is possible that Paul is thinking of how Satan can take advantage of the discipline process to alienate a person from the church or even from Christianity. The presence of the plural, that we may not be outsuited, suggests, however, that the congregation is in mind. Paul could well be thinking of how Satan can take advantage of an unforgiving, overly legalistic attitude to sow division and dissension in the church. Mention of the majority suggests that a difference of opinion existed within the Corinthians congregation that Satan could easily exploit. This is probably why in verse 10 Paul says, "If you forgive anyone, I also forgive for your sake." He also understates the seriousness of the offense in his qualification, if there was anything to forgive. If you forgive anyone is literally whom you forgive something, and assumes that they will in fact do as he had advised. Otherwise, Satan stands a chance of outtooting them, but not because the church has not been forewarned. We are not unaware of his schemes. Paul states in verse 11, one of the Christian's best defenses against Satan's ploys is prior awareness of his purpose and methods. Paul offers his own forgiveness in the sight of Christ. At the start, he invoked God as a witness to his wanting to spare the church pain on a return visit. Now, as he concludes this section, he calls on Christ as a witness to the genuineness of his forgiveness of the man who had caused him pain on the previous visit. Paul's personal forgiveness of an individual who had deeply hurt and publicly humiliated him provides an important model both for the Corinthians and for us today. It is a reminder of what Jesus taught his disciples about forgiveness. If we ask God to forgive our sins, we ask because we ourselves are willing to forgive anyone who sins against us. Someone once made the comment to John Wesley, "I never forgive," to which he aptly replied, "Then, sir, I hope that you never sin." Wesley's quick-witted response highlights the truth that it is only as we are willing to forgive others that God extends forgiveness to us.